This is the external anatomy of the heart. We have the atria located in the superior area of the heart. We have the ventricles in the inferior part of the heart. Separating the ventricles, we have the interventricular sulcus, which you have coronary vessels running along here and fat deposits. So with the bottom chambers are the ventricles, the top chambers are the atria. On the atria, we have these ear-like extensions. This is the right side of the heart, so these are called auricles of the right atrium. And then we have the auricle of the left atrium. Major blood vessels located on the superior surface of the heart. On the anterior view, we could see the pulmonary trunk, which leads to the pulmonary arteries. This takes oxygen poor blood to the lungs. And then to the right of the pulmonary trunk, we're going to see the aorta. On the right to the aorta, we're going to see the superior vena cava that's bringing oxygen poor blood to the heart, to the right atrium. Sort of see it there. Superior vena cava. This is the superior surface of the heart. In the inferior surface of the heart, we see that the heart has a conical shape, and that's called the apex of the heart. This is the anterior view of the heart. Superficial anatomy of the heart. We turn the heart over and we have the posterior view of the heart. In the posterior part of the heart, you see that this here in a peach color, this is the left atria. Left atria makes up the base of the heart. And then inferior here, separating the atria from the ventricles, is the coronary sulcus. Coronary sulcus. Inside the coronary sulcus, the groove, we have the coronary sinus. The coronary sinus. That's the external anatomy of the heart. Posterior view, you could see the descending aorta. Oxygen poor blood comes to the heart via the vena cava, superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. Right here. It goes into the right atria. From the right atria, it'll go to the ventricles. From the right ventricle, it'll go to the pulmonary trunk. And the pulmonary trunk, it'll come back to the left atria via the pulmonary veins, left atria into the left ventricles. Now we'll take a look at the internal anatomy of the heart. The internal anatomy of the heart, we'll go over the human model first, and then we'll go over the sheep model. We have blood coming into the right atria, from the right atria to the right ventricle. The right ventricle has between the right ventricle and the right atria, we have the valve called the left atrioventricular valve. This valve is also called the tricuspid valve. It's anchored down to papillary muscles here in the ventricle via these cord-like extensions called chordae tendineae. From here, blood goes into the pulmonary trunk via the pulmonary semilunar valve to the pulmonary trunk, goes to the lungs, becomes oxygenated, picks up oxygen from the lungs, it comes back to the heart. That's called the pulmonary circuit. From the lungs, it comes back oxygen-rich via the pulmonary veins into the left atrium. From the left atrium, it goes into the left ventricle via the left atrioventricular valve, also called the bicuspid valve, and the mitral valve. This valve also is anchored down to papillary muscle via chordae tendineae. Papillary muscle. Now the anatomy of the sheep heart, highlighting the structures that blood's going through. So we did a clamp cut where we cut along the right margin, starting at the superior vena cava around the apex into the left margin. From there, we are able to open up the heart via clamp cut. And we are in the right atrium. Oxygen poor blood flows from the right atrium to the right ventricle via the right atrioventricular valve, also called the tricuspid valve. It is attached to papillary muscle in the ventricle via cord-like extensions called chordae tendineae. Oxygen poor blood's in the right ventricle. From the right ventricle, blood will go to the pulmonary trunk, to the pulmonary arteries via the pulmonary semilunar valve. One unique feature of the right ventricle is this moderator band that's only located on the right ventricle. And it'll help prevent overexpansion of the right ventricle. Blood goes to the lungs. There's gas exchange, oxygen's picked up, carbon dioxide's dropped off. Blood will come back, oxygen rich, to the left atrium via the pulmonary veins. From the left atrium, it'll go to the left ventricle via the left atrioventricular valve. Left atrioventricular valve, which are also anchored down to papillary muscle via chordae tendineae. These valves help prevent regurgitation or backflow of blood and ensures that blood flows in one direction. So now blood is in the left ventricle. From the left ventricle, it goes to the aorta via the aortic semilunar valve. The structure separating the ventricles is called the interventricular septum. Few differences here between the ventricles. We have the right ventricle, the left ventricle. They're separated by the interventricular septum. The wall of the right ventricle is a lot thinner than the wall of the left ventricle. The left ventricle is pumping blood to the systemic circuit everywhere in the body. The right ventricle is pumping blood to the pulmonary circuit, which is closer to pumping blood all the way to the toe. So the lungs are a lot closer. So that's the internal anatomy of the heart.